Yes, ma'am, your screen is visible.
Perfect. So, first of all, a small brief of contents what we are going through. Now, when we talk about startups and what all things we require in the legal end, it's basically for two quick reasons. First, to minimize what risk we can foresee in future if we are not well complied. That's one. The other one is to ensure that whatever stakeholder who comes in touch with us in our startup journey, be it an investor, an incubation center, another director on board, or maybe a new shareholder or debentures, people giving you loans. Anyone needs to have trust in your startup, and the basis of that trust always go by checking your books, right? So to ensure you have the right book in your, you have the right books, you have the right accounts, legal compliance sorted. All this comes from the very first day of your startup journey as you start your, ideation process or market validation, whatever you are, starting with. So from there, two things that we need to keep in mind considering the legal compliances. First, we need to be very clear with our books from day one, with our entities. The choice of entities we'll be discussing further and everything from day one. And then, of course, we have to maintain it on a regular basis, so as to make sure that all the stakeholders who come on board are well, uh, you know, they hold trust on us, and thus we hold major negotiation power whenever it comes to those investor decisions or dilution of shares in future. Now, yes. So legal framework basically consists of key legislation affecting startups and then regulatory bodies. So first of all, key legislations would be the Companies Act or the intellectual properties, the legal agreements that you need, the tax compliances, the labor laws that comes along the way, and much more, right? And then for all of this, we have separate bodies covering all this. So for example, if we talk about Companies Act and entity creation and listing our entity in the with the central government as a startup, then we have Ministry of Corporate Affairs of India and DPIIT, you know. And then, of course, if we talk about tax regulation, we have Income Tax Department. If we talk about money inflow, outflow, foreign investments, etc., we have FEMA, SEBI. So there are bodies, multiple bodies will be involved with the startups in future as you take your journey ahead, and all these bodies will be checking up on you. So you have to make sure that you are well complied with all of them. Now, the next one is, did you see my screen changing?
No, ma'am. Now it is changing.
Okay. Yes. So this, I feel, I would just get, like to get the background, Sonam or Priyanka. Majority of the audience here are coming from what stage? I mean, have they incorporated the entity, or they're looking for the choice of entity, or they're in the funding rounds? Can I get that, Limbs?
Ma'am, we have a wide categories of audience actually. So there are startups, there are idea stage startups, and also there are aspiring entrepreneurs, research scholars.
Got
So
it.
it's a wide background of audience.
Okay. So, I'm taking it one by one for, the mass audiences, because there are people who are still choosing for the right entity, and there are audience who have selected the, wrong entity maybe, and they want to have some clarification. So I'll start with an example. A few startups comes to us after completing 2 or 3 years of their age, when they're finally in a position to get funding, and then they realize the entity is not matching with the format that required. For example, they have a partnership firm or an LLP registered, and then they find an investor who is very passionate about the idea and who feels like, yeah, we're ready to invest 50 lakh, for example, in your idea. And they say that we will be requiring 10% of your shareholding. Now, in partnership or in LLP, there is no shareholding as such, correct? It's a capital-based entity. There, they lose the power to get that funding because the entity is not right. So now they have to jump in and decide to shift their company from partnership or LLP, whatever, to a private limited entity, right? So given the choice, the government gives you, multiple choices. If you want to register yourself in the Startup India, then the choices gets limited. But nevertheless, I think we can quickly wrap up this entity choice or the vast options to one, which is a private limited company, which in my view fulfills all the criterias. So here, if we have any startup who is looking to decide on which entity type they should go on, I would clearly say it should be a private limited company. It gives you numerous advantages. It gives you, as I said, shares that you can dilute and provide, shares to the investors, or any body corporate who is ready to invest in you. And secondly, it comes with a limited liability provision. So, God forbids, but if anything goes south in your company, if things doesn't work out, then your risk minimizes the moment you are in a private limited company versus the sole proprietorship or partnership where you have unlimited liability. If anything goes wrong, your personal assets might be on stake. And then thirdly, it's very convenient to scale if you have a private limited structure with you, because government bodies accept private limited in a very comfortable manner versus what they think about proprietorship or partnership. So there are multiple more, advantages that comes along, but I'll limit this conversation right now to it. So I think private limited can be one good option. And for those who feel like they already have a partnership or a sole proprietorship or an LLP, I would recommend that whenever you feel the time is right, you should just opt for the conversion process or to convert yourself from the beginning, with the new entity in a private limited as soon as possible for ease and furtherance of your business. But yes, if you are confused or if your ideation is still on the MVP, stage, then you can hold up a little bit. But make sure that finally, when you're into the business and you are in the industry putting your foot forward for investments, you have a private limited company in place. And the next is basic, licenses, because it's a very long list, and as I said, I'll be handpicking those which is relevant to the mass audiences. So, Shop and Establishment Act, coming from the agricultural backgrounds, I think manufacturing, trading, both are the aspects for the startups that have agri background, right? So, Shop and Establishment license is a state subject. So all the state governments impose this requirement on the businesses to have a permission or the license from the government to operate, in the state. So it's more about having a commercial premise requires mandatorily to have this licenses. So this is not avoidable. That's one. And the process simply goes like, just have a private limited company in place first. After you are a private limited company, you just register yourself as a startup. Once you have registered yourself as a startup, then just go with basic licenses requirements, just like shop and establishment. And then if you are eligible, like you're crossing the particular baseline limit of 20 lakhs, or 40 lakhs in some states, or you are doing interstate transaction, then you also need to register yourself under GST. And then industry specific licenses. For example, if you're into food industry, then FSSAI is mandatory. If you are into quality checks, where that would be important, ISO, Hallmark, ISI would come into picture. So a lot of industry specific, department specific regulations would come into picture. Now, this, I think, employment and labor law will quickly take it further, because less relevant at this point in time, because for startups, I think they need a point to reach on 10 or 20 numbers of the employee, and until you reach there, the provisions can be relaxed for you. So this is less relevant. But yes, now see, this is one side of the story when it comes to employment contracts, employment laws. Like, you need to go to the Provident Funds office or insurance and register yourself. But then the cut to what's more relevant here is to have your papers clear, your books ready, your agreements in place. Because as a startup, most of the times founder is everything. Or co-founders and founders come together and work along in the idea, being the salesman, being the marketing person, the manufacturer, the one who is taking care of legalities, everything is one person or two, right? On that point, you really need to understand that keeping contracts and co-founders agreements or employees agreements, all this is very necessary to avoid any future conflicts. So as I was saying, just start with a private limited company, have a startup registration, and after that, go for the basic licenses. And then at the same time, in parallel, you also start having the basic agreements in place. That is really mandatory. Not by laws at that point in time, but definitely it be mandatory when it comes to the future contracts of funding, etc. So you need to have a written employee contracts, co-founders agreement, non-disclosure agreement, non-compete agreements, all sort of things in place once you start your business that mode. Next, we do have intellectual property rights. So IPR is a subject matter, of course. Not necessarily all the IPs apply to you, but patents and trademarks are the two most prominent IP that would come into picture in a agri-startup journey, skipping design and copyright for purpose. Now here, trademark is the most prominent because trademark, we get trademark for the logo, plus the tagline, and plus the the name of the brand. So I think every one of the startups actually has a name. Every startup has a brand. So as soon as you can, you should register that name, because you are making less profit naturally because you are a startup, but you are definitely putting yourself out in the market, bringing in the visibility, and hence you are growing your goodwill with time. Now, you making a goodwill is one thing, but securing that goodwill and protecting it is another. And that you should do as soon as possible by filing the trademarks. And if it's about a process or a IP that you have developed, I mean, specific software or hardware, then it's going to be a patent. So you need to work on patent and trademarks also in parallel when we talk about the processes, of the beginning of it. So next we have registering. I'm not going deep down to the registration process, but mostly it's like you just apply to the authority, selecting the category and class, going through all the database to check what is the availability of the trademarks at your at the name of your brand. And then if it's available, you just apply for the application. If you get any objection from the government, you reply to it, you attend the hearings. And by you, I mean your attorney, your consultant would do it on your behalf. So as soon as again you just start the process of registering, because the government or the complete process itself takes a minimum of 6 months for the registration. So that is actually taking a very long time. So soon you start the better advantage you have to securing your brands and processes. Now, next we have tax compliances. So as soon as you start a business, it's unavoidable to just stay limited and avoid the tax compliances. It's very impossible. The moment you earn a rupee, you are contributing, and thus you are liable to pay to the government a huge chunk of it as a tax. So tax planning from day one is very necessary. Whatever expense and I always say this to startups, those who feel tele is outdated, or it's hard to work on tele, etc. You have multiple options today. You can just go and opt for the right accounting software, and then with that software you can just start doing your entries on daily basis or weekly basis depending on the volume. But even if that's not possible, just start to work on the shoe method, and shoebox method. It's very simple. You select 2 shoe boxes, or any box sort of thing. You just put expenses, slips or invoices, whatever you get in one, and all the profits or incoming slips in the another. End of the year, whenever you want to check where are you, what you have earned, or what sort of tax implications would come to you, you'll be in a position to understand what is incoming and outgoing. This is, trust me, on my experience, this is one major drawback that every startup does and faces. They do not maintain the books of accounts. You should, and if you can't, at least do the shoebox method. It's going to help you. And basis that, you will reach out to a value where you can plan the taxations that will go around in your startup. So there are two types of startups, tax implications basically. One is direct, the another one is indirect. Direct is always the income tax that we pay at the end of the year usually, or advanced tax payments to the income tax authority. Indirect ones are usually in the GST, service tax, etc. So these are again deep subjects, but I'll leave it here. Both of these are applicable to you mostly. Income tax is 100%, GST is case-to-case basis. We can discuss further one-on-one to have more clarity here. This is what, I was really talking about, filing returns and documentations. Creating an entity or starting a startup is the most, happening or easy step that you would take, trust me. But to keep it going, to keep the wheels rolling, and to have the compliances flow proper is the most difficult step that you'll be taking, and you have to take it gradually and one at a time, right? So you cannot skip filing your returns, you cannot skip the deadlines. You have to maintain the proper books of accounts, because government's gonna come to you later to just check on your books of accounts, and if you cannot produce that in time, you will again be penalized for that. So from day one, no excuses, you have to do it. And then second point is deadlines for filing returns. I think it's difficult to list out here, but every year in 6 months or quarters, there are various deadlines that comes up. For example, if it's just a private limited company with no GST, I think still you have an obligation to get the audit done by October each year. You have to file the ROC returns by October and November each year. You have to do the KYC things. You have to file multiple forms. So, it's not just it's a complex process. It's a very simple thing if you do it regularly as and when required. But if you skip 1 or 2 years and you want to go back, it will be a heavy burden of penalty on you. And also it's gonna come with a lot of non-compliances where you'll again lose a lot of negotiation power when you go in front of any investor, right? Then this is for specific e-commerce people, which is not applicable to you. This we can definitely discuss, not deep diving again. Data protection and privacy laws are a subject right now. And if you ever have a website, it is mandatory for you to have terms and conditions, privacy policies, and disclaimers written very clearly, which people approve of as they enter your website. Because once they enter, they of course give their database to you, and if that is leaked or misused, you'll be in a position of downfall maybe. So there you need to have your contracts, legal docs ready even for the websites, right? Next, we have funding and investment regulations. It's very specific. If it's a foreign investments, then we have to route it through FDI, which is foreign direct investments, through FEMA compliance, and we also need to take specific approvals in the process. But if it is not, then internally there are a lot of MC regulations that governs, which talks about how you issue shares. For example, if you're issuing shares to a VC, then there's specific process of writing down the term sheet and then signing the SHA. And after doing both these things, you get the money. After getting the money, you sort of give them shares via a specific process again, which is, going through private placements or right issues. So all these are technical terms and jargons which I do not want to burden you with. But the bottom line or crux is every process that we go through has a specific rules mentioned in the act. We have to abide by it. And my only suggestion would be to each one of these startups to have a consultant in place who helps you out throughout the process, because as complex as it might sound, it's really not. It's very easy. If you just know the timelines and you abide by it. So I think that's about it. I'll not make it more complex or stretch it further, but I'll be open to questions that comes along. Yes, Sonam, Priyanka.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for your insightful and engaging presentation. And we would, where we talked about importance of legal compliances that minimize legal risk, building trust with investor, legal framework of India, type of business structure like sole proprietorship, partnership, private limited company, and IPR registration and protection, IP and tax compliances we talked about. And for everyone attending, please feel free to drop your questions in chat box. We will take them after the second speaker's presentation. Next, I'd like to invite my colleague Gina Paul to introduce our second speaker.
Thank you, Sonam. I'm Gina from Team Manage CAA. I'm honored to introduce today's second speaker, Ms. Ananya Sanyal. Ms. Ananya, a qualified company secretary and lawyer, also strategic partner to Global Legal Capability Center in India. She has about 25 years of experience in corporate governance, legal risk mitigation, legal operations, and strategy. Ananya has experience in navigating complex legal landscapes and taking on leadership roles in projects centered on profitability, turnarounds, business restructuring, new business development, and rapid growth. In her previous role, Ananya was General Counsel and Company Secretary for India Business of Herbalife International. She was also the core executive committee leader responsible for setting up the India GBS and a Center of Excellence for Research and Development in Bangalore. Further, Ananya held leadership roles in company committees relating to prevention of sexual harassment, DEI, data privacy, ethics and compliance, and anti-corruption and anti-bribery. Over the course of her career, Ananya has held legal and compliance roles in business across a wide range of industries, including food, manufacturing, HR services, IT services, financial services, and knowledge process outsourcing. With this short note of introduction, I hand over the session to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Gina and Manage CIA for, first of all, this opportunity. It's really a pleasure, and thank you for the introduction. So what happens when you are a second speaker, you realize that the first speaker has already spoken a lot that you wanted to speak today, okay? So because this topic is so generic and so vast, you will find kind of a bit of an overlap over here. However, nonetheless, as I said, this is so important and crucial. There is no harm in hearing something which probably I've already heard, and each speaker probably brings a different, a little different perspective to it. So with this one disclaimer I have is that this is a very, very general overview, and you should not consider this as a formative or a definitive legal advice. For legal advice, you need to consult your legal consultants. Yeah. So the next slide, and what I have, next slide. As for the agenda, I've kept it a little bit of introduction, then a company structure and registration part, a bit of intellectual property, and then, a couple of slides covering the key laws and the regulations. And then, of course, we will conclude. Next. So first, if you see that agriculture, we talk a lot about startups these days, but one of the particular segment which really, really is important from the Indian perspective, because as we all know, India has been an agrarian society for many years now. And especially after the Green Revolution, we have seen not only the government, who's trying to solve the nutrition needs, the food needs, the connectivity needs, getting in new products, new innovation, but a lot of private sector people, individuals have started with this thought of doing something, to change, rather improve our agriculture-based economy to something which was in the past, to something better. And it is one of the significant contributors to the globe, to our GDP, as we all know, right? And when we talk about agri, you have to first understand, because I think many of you are students, many of you probably are already in the value chain. Now, when we talk about an agri startup, that itself is very vast, right? So you could be a farming, you could be interested in farming. You have a farmland, you want to develop that and make, produce the raw vegetables or the raw, or you could be somebody who wants to connect those produce, that is the products that the farmers already have, connect to the end consumer. So you are in that logistics chain. You could be somebody who's a technology person, and you want to improve either the infrastructure capabilities of an agricultural startup, or you could build in something. Today we talk a lot about AI technology, right? Or you could be somebody who is somewhere in between and connecting all of this together. So first, when you talk about the agri startup, you will know your own strengths, right? You're a farmer, but I also am good at technology. Some of you are probably studying your masters in agri technology, and you have to do that. So once you do that, this is what my area is of my expertise and I want to get into. That's one of the first things that you have to, amongst others, right, is talk about what are the laws and what are the regulations that impact my startup that I'm about to, right? Now, what does it benefit you? Obviously ensures a smooth, it's like, quite a traffic light. There is a green and you just go through that green light and green channel. There is no block. Moment there is a red flag, right? What happens? It not only, and you're driving at a pace, suddenly if there is a red light and red flag over there, either from a regulator, your investor, or your customers as such, whatever efforts you have done, it comes either to a complete screeching halt, right? Or it deviates you from the growth path, right? So that's why, your compliances. And secondly, who wants to get into a disputes, pay penalties? At times it becomes even severe, right? You don't want to do that, right? You want to do your game in the way it should be. And of course, it facilitates your access to your government schemes, your funding, your international markets, right? So that's why while you are first determining and figuring out what you want to do, I want to be a farmer, I want to do a technology, I want to do this. Along with that, you should also start thinking that what are the legal compliances that I need to be mindful of while I'm, getting into the business that I want to. Next slide. Again, once you have that, then you come to the company registration and the structure. Now, company registration and structure, typically in a startup, what we see, and the same applies for your agri startup as well. It could be a sole proprietorship, it could be a limited partnership, it could be a private limited company. Now, while of course we know that having a private limited company is always advantageous, because why? The government knows you are filing with the regulatory authorities, they know you, the tax authorities know you. Any investor, if you're getting an angel investor or foreign investor or government fund, it's easier. However, I will not say that that is what you need to choose to begin with, right? Because today, I have just 20,000 bucks with me, or I have just 50,000 rupees with me. I want to do something. I don't have the time to get into a private, because private limited is easier to register, get through it. At the same time, you don't have time. You just want to start with a sole proprietor. That option is also available to you, right? You have a partner. Is it your college buddies, or you're just working in another startup or another grown company, and you just want to start and you don't even want to think who's going to be director, who's going to be the shareholder. Don't worry about it. You can start with a limit, and there's always an option to change as you move along. However, if you are at a matured stage and I have thought about all of this and we know how that we want to do it a little bigger scale, then please go ahead for a private, you could choose private limited company as an option. Now, registrations, there are 100 varieties of registrations which comes along as you do. One, if you register as a company, it would be, it would be the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. If at the very initial stage you are getting funding from outside, that means you have a friend who lives in the US or who lives in the UK or who lives in the Middle East, has some fund and wants to invest, then please go through the foreign direct investment rules and regulations from the beginning while you are structuring your limited company, right? And of course, the tax at the very beginning, whether it is a direct tax or indirect tax, the GST registration is also something you have to start at the very beginning. Now, and then the shops and establishments and other registrations which comes along as you are in the process. Next slide. I think we have already talked a lot about, but always remember, while at the beginning of your stage, you are very, very focused on what my product would be, what I'm going to do, from where am I going to get money, you tend to forget. So you're talking about the physical assets, you're talking about the physical liabilities, you're trying to get things done. What you at times tend to miss your attention, which misses our attention, is the intangible assets, that is the intellect. Because remember, when you're coming with a startup, why, first of all, you are getting into a startup? Because you want to do something and make a mark for yourself and leave a legacy, number one. Stand out amongst various other players in the market. And because you have that intellect, you are the first person who thought about it, right? So in the legal parlance, that also is an asset. That is an intangible asset. And unless you take the right legal and compliance steps to protect that asset, right, as you do in a physical asset, unless you do that, then today, even though it was your thought, you have innovated, somebody else could take the benefit. So the monetary benefit around it, you lose out. Not only monetary benefit and lose out. Remember, sometimes you get into legal disputes also because somebody else will claim that, you know, this was mine and not yours. And unless you have not taken the appropriate steps and registration, you will not be able to defend yourself in any court of law, not only in India, but any other international court of law as well. So a couple of very basic, one is patent. That means all of you who are in technology, AI technology, or in the hardcore machinery, you are developing something, or any product manufacturing process, like in a food manufacturing process or seed developing process, you do something very innovative, think about patenting that, right? Other is a trademark. As we say, what is my trademark, right? How you identify yourself, your logo, your company name, your brochure is all combination, or and at times your designs of, you know, your either product, the packaging that you have done, that also can be covered under the trademark or the logo that you are defining for yourself. Other is the geographical indication, and this is especially important for an agri. For example, if we talk about the basmati rice, we talk about the Darjeeling tea, and you find many in the news where somebody else is claiming rights. Somebody from UK claims, you know, basmati rice was ours now. So that one is getting covered under the trademark, etc. But remember, if you are from a particular region, particular zone, then this is also another area of intellectual property which you might have to take under consideration. Next slide. The key agricultural laws, and around the next few slides, I will talk about the key laws and regulation, not necessarily agricultural. So if you are into farming, as I said, so you have you have a land base, you know, or you have been inherited something and you want to get into agriculture. But remember, the first thing that you have to understand is whether that classifies under agricultural land or not, because a lot of disputes happens that has already been converted under commercial development, right? And if you're not in an agricultural land and have the appropriate licenses for yourself and not following those guidelines, remember, you will miss out on the different benefits that is specifically given for the agriculture businesses, right? Then certain very standard usually happens is the food safety standards registration, because most of you who will get into you know, food, in any process of food, you're developing, you're using food, or you're selling it, you're trading, or putting it through a website, you will definitely need a food safety registration. Then the standard packaging, you know, the Legal Metrology Act also plays a very important role when it talks about the packaging, labeling, and the quality standards of your products, right? And the other, as I said, you know, APDA, DGFT, other registrations that you have to. So again, here depends on what industry, what you are thinking about, what are the applicable registrations that you need. And this part, especially when I said the agricultural land, a piece of land, do a thorough due diligence whether your land gets classified appropriately or not. Next slide, please. In an agricultural, we tend to think that, you know, no, I'm a non-polluting industry because, you know, I'm not doing chemicals, I'm not manufacturing weapons, I'm not into anything, you know, which is using atomic power and all, and hence mine is a non-polluting. No, many of the agricultural, you know, companies and even startups does impact the environment. Hence, you know, if your business is in the use of any chemicals that you are using, or any product that you are using, pesticides, etc., which impacts the environment, you have to be complying with the Environmental Protection Act. If you are using a lot of water or minimum amount of water, or you are discarding water in the process of your manufacturing, then you have to take appropriate licenses from the pollution control boards. And here, remember, this is not a static process that once you take a license and you can continue. No, you have to evaluate this over and over yearly. Again, that what is your capacity, what is the approval that you got, and how much are you actually emitting, how much you are actually using, and basis that you have to keep on renewing renewing your licenses. And hence, one of the regulators with whom you tend to interact a lot when you are in this industry is your pollution control board and the regulators. Next slide, please. Labor laws. See, once I'm on my own, I, me, myself, you don't need to bother about labor or employment laws. However, the moment you engage people, who are coming in as employees, even if you're getting somebody on a contractual basis, you as the principal employer will need to be mindful about the labor and employment related laws, whether it's a Factories Act. Now, Factories Act, remember, Factories Act is one is for the setting up of the factory that you have, but the workers that you are engaging in factory, and here again, I'm reminding you that even if you are outsourcing it and doing all the non-core activities through a contractual, through a contractor, still you will be responsible for the compliances. And Factory Act itself is a very voluminous one. Then the minimum wages, employment, PF, Provident Fund, the Contract Labor Act. Again, the PF, etc. figures off after, but the threshold is very low. It could be 8 to 10. And, before even you realize that it's applicable, you already have 8 or 10 people in your system. So these are the areas. So, and this is just, as I said, not an exhaustive list, just a very overview. There are many other appropriate today. Now we have the labor code as well. Second is as an employee, one of the things that you should be absolutely very, very critical about and mindful about is how you are protecting the health, safety, and taking the welfare measures for your employees that you have. The other is that the prevention of sexual harassment of women at workplace. So if you have women employees at your place, then you have to be complying with a particular registration. India is one of the unique countries where it is not agnostic to the gender, but there is a specific law which safeguards the women at workplace, and hence be mindful that these are applicable. So all of this, one is which are the laws, regulations which are applicable to you. Second is which are the committees that you need to have. For example, in factories that you might have to need a safety committee. When you have a sexual harassment, prevention of sexual harassment, you might need to have an internal redressal committee in place. So those are the thoughts which you have to parallelly think while you are, having your startup and growing in the journey. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now, data. Lot of discussions, talks around. India was a country where nobody bothered about data. My cousins, third cousins, fourth cousin would know everything about me. When I was born, whom I married, who my daughter is, they would know, right? But it's an evolving world. We are in business. So anything which is personal data, which can directly identify the data, which can directly identify to a living individual is classified as personal data. And in the process, you will realize most of the businesses, we will be ending up collecting certain personal data either from your farmers or from your customers or from your vendors or from your employees. So all the stakeholders that you see, you're collecting that. So there is a new law now, DPDP, Digital Personal Data Protection Act, which really, brings in a lot of strength and teeth now. You have to be mindful about the technology, IT related. And if you are dealing your products and giving it to the end consumer, if it's a B2B business, maybe the end consumer related compliance doesn't apply to you much. But if you're producing something and selling it to a consumer through an online website, either your own website or an e-commerce website, you have to be aware of and be compliant to the consumer protection laws. Now, the consumer protection law itself deals with, where you are being truthful, you're advertising appropriately, the claims that you're making are appropriate. But when you're especially going and selling in the e-commerce platform, you have to be compliant with this. The other is, of course, contract law. As we say, anything that two people are agreeing to and speaking is getting into a contract. And especially in a business term, while we trust each other, you may trust your employee, you may trust your vendor, you may trust your investor. However, because you are in business, you have to be very particular that the contract, appropriate contract, where you cover your risks, and at the same time allow that growth over here. So contract law is also something which is applicable while you draft your the agreements that you have with the different stakeholders. Next. Consumer protection laws, as I've already spoken, remember the fundamental thought of consumer protection laws. At the end of the day, the consumer has a right to know what he or she is paying for. They have a right to know what benefits they're getting and whether it is clearly defined over there or not. They have a right to be protection against anything which is actually a distortion or a misrepresentation of the fact. So your label, so you have the product, your label and packaging should be absolutely truthful. The way you're advertising your products should be absolutely truthful and not misleading. And hence, Consumer Protection Act and labeling, packaging and labeling laws are also equally important while you're designing your product and going it out there in the market. Next. As an agri startup, as you know, you get a lot of subsidies, unlike the other industries, right? So there is this certain national schemes which are there, certain industry specific schemes which are there, and those, please read those very carefully, because if you read them, second is be compliant with their requirement, and then the benefit that you have is either a tax benefit or a funding benefit or a first mover's advantage over there, and hence the compliances around that is also something which is to your own benefit that you should start right from the beginning to be aware of when you're getting into. Next, please. Now, while it all seems very, very overwhelming, oh, so many laws, 1,000 laws, and all that, trust me, if you are a process-driven person, if you have put some process around this madness, it's not very earth-shattering, right? Each step, as we say, each step at a time, but you have to look at it holistically. First is do the compliance risk assessment. Now, at the initial stage, maybe you think that I know all by myself and do it. No, but trust me, rely on some external partner who's good at it. Now, you don't need to have to go to the most expensive or the big fours or the most expensive firms of the world. Choose your partner, external partner, but do choose somebody who understands the legal landscape and the regulatory landscape, who can be your partner. Along with that person, do a compliance risk assessment, rather legal risk assessment. Then once you have assessed that, do a monitoring and reporting. That is very important. Sometimes while you're building your startup, you lose focus on that. But remember, even if it's a couple of hours, you have to invest on this couple of hours to regularly monitor how, it's like, when you're growing your crop, every day you're going and seeing whether the seedlings are growing up there or not. When you're manufacturing a product, similarly for compliances, you've done a risk assessment, you've taken certain, but please do a monitoring and see how are you doing around those compliances, and then do a reporting. Reporting one is for your internal purposes, so that you see if there is a gap and there is a need for you to map that gap. Or sometimes you have to report to your regulators and sometimes to your investors as well. Then the compliance audit. Try to get in somebody. It's always a good idea to get a third party. Even if the law doesn't tell you to get a third party auditor, get somebody to audit and inspect how you're doing on the compliances and regulations, because that helps you build yourself better. And consequences and non-consequences. Consequences, I'll talk a little bit on the next slide, but the consequences of non-compliance is humongous. That means sometimes it could be an absolute lock on your door. Sometimes it could be penalties, fines, delays, litigation, your investors moving out. Who wants that? You really don't want that to happen, right? The next slide. Next slide, please. Last, while we have spoken a lot, remember, you are in a space where you are actually solving the basic, what is the basic need of humanity? Hunger, clothing, and shelter. So one of the major things you are solving, trying to solve for the society at large, is hunger, right? Nutrition, good nutrition. So if you do it the right way, following the laws and the compliances and doing it as an important stakeholder of the society, you are actually improving the food safety and quality of all of us. Today, what you do, we will reap our benefits. Our children will reap that benefit, right? You enhance the environmental protection. If you see some industries, they're mindlessly. And today we see in Bangalore, I'm based out of Bangalore. Bangalore is recording 35 degrees Celsius today, higher than Delhi. Imagine what we have done to this planet. So if you do the right things, you will be enhancing the environmental protection. You'll be enhancing the public health. If you have good nutrition, if you're getting good food, we fall sick less, right? And of course, you will be the pioneers who will increase the market opportunities, not only for yourselves, but for many others who will join either you or who will follow your footsteps and increase the market opportunities. So all the best to all of you. And don't worry much about legal and compliance. It's important, but at the same time, if you plan it, as I said, as I said, it's not rocket science. And most important, this last slide I think is most important. The thought I wanted to do is please remember that you are here for a very, very important mission, and hence, please do it the right way. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your valuable insight with us, where we discuss about overview of agri-startup landscape in India, company registration and structure, environmental laws and sustainability, labor and employment law, data protection, technology compliances and contracts, consumer protection law, and also we talked about simple step of complaint. So now I encourage participants to raise your hand if you'd like to ask any question, and we will unmute you. And you can also use chat box for your questions. Okay, we will start with the discussion. So, first question is for Dhananjay Kumar Sharma. It is for Ananya ma'am. DGFT and APEDA, how to connect with them if professional help available?
Yes, absolutely, and very pertinent question. There are specific, service providers who help you connect with these organizations, right? I quickly offhand wouldn't have the names of them, but one is there is a list of the service providers which are there, or maybe I can share with, with Manage CIA later, and you could have that. But yes, there are professional people who will help you guide through that.
Thank you, ma'am. And the second question is for Namrata ma'am. Two shoe boxes method, excellent. How about OPC formation?
Okay, so first of all, OPC would still give you trouble because one-person company only allows one person, as the name says, to be in the share capital, right? The cap table. So if you again be at a situation where you're getting funds or someone's interested to join you as a co-founder, you'll never have the scope of expansion, right? Because your company doesn't provide the scope to introduce another shareholder. So I think, in my opinion, one-person company might not suit those startups who are working in a co-founder model or may go for the co-founders in future. And secondly, who want to seek funds from VCs or another ones in future. So yeah, and also my team does help with DGFT and APEDA. So along with the list that Ananya ma'am would provide, you can also get in touch with me if that sort of service would be required.
Thank you, ma'am. And the next question is from Pranav Nath to what is approx cost for registration of a private limited company?
So private limited company, I can talk about the government fee here. There are multiple factors again. If you talk about The stamp duty that you need to pay differs from one state to another. The highest being, somewhere around, and I talk about a 10 lakh standard paid up capital. So for 10 lakhs and two people company, I think the government fee will approximately lie somewhere between 6,000 to 7,000. It can be +2, -2 depending on the states. Secondly, if we go about the professional fees, it ranges from 15K to 25K depending on what your consultant and professional charges. But one thing I would like to be very clear here about is do not go for online registrations. Majority of my clients are those who get companies registered online, and they face a lot of trouble in future because the compliance are not well handled. Rather, the registrations are also not done well, So there are a lot of discrepancies in the application. So don't fall for the online schemes or services available. Rather, go for a trustworthy consultant. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. And the next question is from Ishwar. He's asking, investor bias is a well-known issue where women-led startups received disproportionately lower funding. How can this be tackled structurally?
So who do you want to handle this question? Ananya, do you want to go first?
Yeah. So first of all, this is, I think, a little deviation from the legal and compliances part. It's more about, we are talking about biases, mindset, etc. And trust me, it's not for agri startups that we are talking about that biases for women entrepreneurs. This is general that we think about, across industries. If you've all heard about glass ceiling. There was a time when women were not considered appropriate for the factories. Even today, how many CXO level people are women, right? So, so that is there, and I do appreciate your challenge over there. However, whenever you do your deck, I mean, that's what I have as a principle followed throughout my corporate journey, or even as a good advisor, is do not first position yourself that, hey, I am a woman and I'm doing it, and hence look at me. Don't do that. Just tell, this is where my USP, that my unique selling point is, this is where the innovation is, this is what I'm trying to do, try me out. So the less you talk about the women part yourself, especially when you're talking about investors, right, the more they get attracted. Because in today's world, what is also happening is when people are hearing a lot about women, etc., they're saying, hey, why should I just consider you because you're a woman, right? Hence, my thing would be that first talk about yourself as an investor, sorry, as an entrepreneur. This is what I'm doing. Now, if you are in some business, right, which has a clear advantage of you being a woman, right? I'll give you an example. If you see the tea gardens, right, most of the people who are picking those tea, are women. Why? Because they have those fingers. This is how God has probably made us. We have softer fingers to do that cooking job is appropriate. There you could say, you know what? It's not because of men and women, but we have this many number of women engaged in this business of ours. Why? Because they are better, or they have an advantage in doing that work. Right? I think, and then be prepared. If out of 4 investors that you've approached, if there is one person who's little, not, don't get disheartened. Go to the third person, go to the second person. There is no unique formula how to deal with it. There is no, checklist and compliance. I wish I had that for you, for the others. But as I said, this is how you play around yourself. So talk about your strengths. If you are engaging women, why you are engaging women for that particular role, and why it is beneficial for them to do so. And where you're solving a problem. Today, if you say, these are the women who are engaged to improve their livelihood, right? Yesterday, they weren't doing anything. And with this livelihood, they're going to send somebody for children, somebody to school. They're going to tend to their, tend to their family. Those are the stories, if you have put it over there, rather than being saying, hey, I'm an entrepreneur, give me some special benefits, And despite that, if, as I said, if it fails, so be it, go to the second person.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So we will take next question. It is
I
how
think,
to
Sonam, I would
ensure.
just like to add a couple of
Yes, ma'am.
things here. I'll just take
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
1 minute.
sure, sure.
Sure. So, it's a valid point, Ananya, very well put it across. But I think as much as biasness is there in the industry, I think so are the, supports and schemes available for women entrepreneurs. So not to forget that, and, you can actually look out for opportunities where investor accelerators or incubation centers put their foot forward to help the women entrepreneurs. So yes, you might get some biasness from place A, but there are places B, C, D, E, F where you get more opportunities and women, supporting organizations that look for it. Just to add, Head Start is one of the organization which is coming up for their with their annual we win thing. So if you are in entrepreneurial startup space, you can look for Head Start as a community, and you can look for each major cities of India has a chapter there. So yeah, look for opportunities, Google it, you'll find a lot of organizations supporting women-led startups.
So we have limited time. I am going to take only 2 more questions. So the next question is from Dr. Sweta Agrawal. She is asking, can a food formulation get an IP rights? Ma'am, Namrata ma'am, you want to answer this question?
Sure. So yes, food formulas can get IP rights, no questions about it, but we have to check, is it eligible, is it unique, or the formulas that you're developing, it has to be checked on a particular basis. It's not that food formulas don't get. Food, medical, pharmaceutical, every SOPs or formulas or arrangements can get secured under IP Protection Act.
Yes, ma'am. So last question I am going to take, how to ensure a company's compliances with legal regulations?
I think in short, all I can say is you have a long list of compliance available already. You can just tick mark what you keep doing and earmark what's pending. But the better and most efficient way, in my opinion, is to hire a good consultant in whatever capacity you can, who can take care of A to Z. Like there are specific exemptions in terms of, tax or corporate compliance is available to startups. So any professional focusing on startup consultancy in terms of legal compliance can be a go-to person for you. If you find to search, you'll find from your region, from across the nation, everywhere. And that way you can make sure that you hand over all the burdens to that one person. And being a startup, don't try to do the legalities all by yourself. That's the quickest and most confirmed way to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Thank
just
you.
to add to Namrata, thanks. There are also some tools, legal compliance management tools, SaaS-based tools, very inexpensive. So if you have a little bit of funds, maybe you could think of investing, because those are all, structured and automated. You get the automated triggers, when to file, when not to file. They also send you the regular updates as well. So once you have that and a person doing around it, then, you are less dependent on outside. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. And now I will invite Mr. Arvind Singh Rao to share some details about our pre-incubation program.
Great to see you all here. Your presence in this webinar indicates that either you are already connected with any agri startup or you are interested in agri startup journey. If I am right, then especially for you, Manage CI is conducting their 8th pre-incubation mentoring program. This is a 22 days online program which is specially designed for agri startups and aspiring agripreneurs at idea stage and pre-idea stage. However, anyone who are passionate about agri startup, they can join this program. Here we will provide mentorship as well as hand-on-hand experience to the participant. Registration are already started and the last date of application is 28th February. Since there are limited slots available, that's why I encourage you to secure your places at earliest. For more detail, you can visit our Manage CI website, and we are sharing the registration link in chat box. So don't miss this opportunity and kickstart your agri startup journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Arvind. So we are almost at the end of today's session. If you have any more questions, you can reach out to our speakers. Their contact info is in the chat box. If you miss any important information, you can watch this webinar on our YouTube channel. Also, make sure to follow us on social media for updates and more useful content. Let's bring us to the end of today's session. I'd like to thank our speakers and all of you who attended today's session, and also to our director, Dr. Sarvanan Raj sir, whose idea and support have made this 229th webinar possible, and also my team to organize this webinar successfully. And I request all the participants to please take a moment to give a feedback on today's session. The link is in the chat box, and don't forget to register for our upcoming webinars. We look forward to see you next week with another exciting topic. Thank you. Thank you to our speakers. Thanks again, and have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.